and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a Little Blue Book. It just happens to be Little Blue Book number 727, and it is titled The Psychology of the Affections, written by Vance Randolph, and it's copyrighted somewhere in the 1920s. So, we're going to start off here, and let's get her opened up. This should be interesting. This is going to be the psychology of the affections according to the 1920s. Pardon me. And here we go. All right. There are 4 chapters. The nature of feeling, feeling as sensation, feeling as an attribute to sensation or of sensation, and feeling as an element of consciousness. So here we go. Introduction. The psychology of the affections or feelings is worth looking into because it deals with the factors which underlie the emotions. The most fascinating, spectacular, and altogether diverting phases of human behavior. A slight acquaintance with the work of the older psychologists in this field and a working knowledge of their methods and theories is necessary to an understanding of what, in this year of grace 1924, is called the new psychology. So, copyright 1924. The psychology of the affections, the nature of feeling. And we'll take a sip of coffee because I got cotton mouth. Okay, here we go. The word feeling, like most others which are employed both in the laboratory and in the street, carries a wide range of meaning and has been used by laymen and scientists alike to designate widely differing phenomena. The older psychologists seem to have used the term feeling and sensation vaguely and interchangeably with reference to all sorts of conscious experiences. To quote Pillsbury, the term feeling was originally used to indicate approximately the same mental state as sensation. We still use the term popularly as synonymous with the sensations of touch and of organic sensations. Ward said in 1887 that most psychologists before Kant, and our English psychologists even to the present day, speak of pleasure and pain as sensations. On the other hand, we find Wundt, as late as 1901, complaining because even yet sensations from the internal organs are called feelings by the psychologists. With the work of the early German psychologists, however, conscious experiences began to fall into 2 classes. First, those which have been correlated with some specific stimulus and some specific nervous mechanism, and second, turning of the page, and second, those which have not. The same sensation became attached to experiences of the first type, while the term feeling was reserved for those of the second class. The visual and auditory experiences were doubtless the first to be recognized as sensations. Air waves were studied and ether waves assumed. Painstaking anatomical and physiological studies of the eye and ear were carried out. The optic and auditory nerves were traced and sectioned and experimented with, and certain more or less definite areas in the brain were found to be connected with these structures. No modern psychologist denies the sensory nature of visual and auditory experiences. Much less is known about taste and smell, but as the sensitive areas are small and definitely located, and the stimuli apparently limited to certain fairly definite classes of objects, we do not hesitate to apply the term sensation to olfactory and gustatory experiences also. I guess, yeah, gustatory. The same thing is true of warmth, cold, and touch. Blix, Goldscheider, and von Frey discovered warm, cold, and touch spots in the early 80s, and later workers have traced nerve fibers and plotted cortical areas so that today the experiences called warmth, cold, and touch are definitely recognized as sensations and are usually associated with the bulbs of Krauss and Pansian corpuscles and end organs of Ruffini and Meissner, and the nerve endings at the roots of the hairs. When we come to pain, we miss this unanimity of opinion. Goldscheider discovered pain spots in 1885, and his findings were later confirmed by von Frey and others. But for some reason, psychologists were slow in accepting them, although the majority today admit the existence of pain spots and regard pain as a sensation, probably served by the free nerve endings. It is still very easy to find expression of contrary opinion. For example, Kolpe said in 1893, pain has been held to be a special quality of cutaneous sensation, and pain nerves put alongside of the nerves subserving warmth, cold, and pressure. This hypothesis has found its chief support among the psychologists. We cannot accept it. Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, while accepting the psychologist's findings in the case of pressure, warmth, and cold, has always denied the existence of pain spots and definite pain receptors. Sensitivity to pain is everywhere in the skin about the same, varying at most in such a way that in some places the pain stimulus acts on the surface and in others not until it is penetrated deeper. Ladd in 1895 rejected the pain spots. Turning of the page. The pain spots discovered by Goldenschneider, von Frey, and others, and did not deal with pain in his section on the cutaneous sensations. Elsewhere in the volume he said that the attempt to identify even our bodily pleasures and pains as specific forms of sensation, with a distinct nervous apparatus having particular loci in the surface of the body, has not succeeded. Nearly everything which we know about the conditions of our pleasures and pains is opposed to the view which considers them as specific sensations. In the revised edition of 1911, he admits grudgingly that the pain sense is perhaps served by the free nerve ends. A fact supporting this view is the absence of other sense qualities from the cornea, the nerve ends in which are the free branching type. Sherrington is far from regarding cutaneous pain as a sensation. He says affective tone is an attribute of all sensation, and among the attributive tones of skin sensation is skin pain. However, the generally accepted position today is well stated by Moore, who says in substance that pain spots do exist, their localization corresponding to that of the free nerve endings in the epidermis, where there are no free nerve endings, Kieslow's area inside of cheek. We get no pain where there are free nerve endings only, cornea, tooth pulp, etc. We get pain only. The pain fibers form a particular pain tract in the cord and are connected directly with the so-called optic thalamus. If this tract is served, according to Hemrich, we lose the sense of pain without loss of general tactile sensibility. A great many psychologists, while granting all this, insist that it applies only to cutaneous pain and not to another type of disagreeable experience, which differs from cutaneous pain in that it is less clear, less definitely localized, less objective in nature, and for which no definite nerve endings have as yet been demonstrated. This experience they regard as affective, not sensory, and they call it the feeling of unpleasantness, to distinguish it from the sensation of pain. Pleasurable experience also has so far baffled the histologist. No definite peripheral pleasure spots have ever been isolated, so the psychologists are still able to retain pleasantness as a feeling. As Stumpf has pointed out, there are three current theories of the nature of feeling. One view identifies feeling with cutaneous, organic, and kinesthetic sensation. This conception, in one form or another, has been put forward by Nicholas, Bourdon, Stumpf, Munsterberg, Woolley, Watson, and others. I regard it as more promising than either of the other theories and have... Oops, got to turn the page again, which has become difficult. And have treated it at some length under the heading Feeling as Sensation. A second theory is that feeling is not identical with sensation, but is an attribute of sensation, just as intensity is an attribute. This view has been advocated by Wundt, Marshall, Stout, Ziehen, and others, but appears to have fallen into comparative dispute, and is not commonly held at present. It is treated in this paper in the section entitled Feeling as an Attribute of Sensation. The third theory is that the feelings are psychic elements, quite distinct from sensations, but on a par with them. All disagreeable experience, except sometimes that introspectively referred to the periphery, is called the feeling of unpleasantness. All pleasant experience is called the feeling of pleasantness, no matter where it is localized, or whether it is localized at all. This view is very widely held just now, and may be considered the orthodox conception. Wundt, Kolpe, Titchener, and Royce are conspicuous defenders of this theory. Their systems differ somewhat, but all are based on the central dogma that feelings are distinct conscious elements, different from sensations. This conception is dealt with in this book in the section captioned Feeling as an Element of Consciousness. To sum up, the early psychologists used the terms feeling and sensation indiscriminately and interchangeably. The work of the psychologists divided conscious experience into two classes. First, those which had been correlated with some definite portion of the nervous mechanism, and second, those which had not. The term sensation became attached to the first group, while the word feeling was used with reference to the second class. Subsequent psychological and histological research has established the sensory character of one so-called feeling after another, until at present only two, pleasantness and unpleasantness, are generally recognized as such. Three conceptions of the nature of the feelings are found in modern literature. First, that feelings are sensations. Second, that feelings are attributes of sensations. And third, that feelings are psychic elements, different from and coordinate with sensations. Pardon me. Feelings as sensations. And we'll take a sip of coffee because I got cotton mouth. Okay. New chapter, Feelings as Sensations. It will be remembered that Goldscheider had published in 1885 his results relative to specific nerve endings for pain, and that Blix, the same year, seriously questioned these findings. No sooner had the probability of specific nerve endings for pain been imitated, however, than pleasure pain theories of the affections galore were set loose. On the other hand, there were numerous theories advanced in opposition to this view, mainly because some philosophizing individuals could not conceive of the possibility of pain nerve endings. And two, just as soon as pain nerves seemed certain, some genetic philosophical psychologists immediately took the liberty of posting pleasure nerves, and this position reaches its culmination in Stumpf. But Bourdon does not bother to posit a pleasure nerve. He merely takes the sensation of tickling as the feeling of pleasantness, and the sensation of pain, which has its specific nerve endings, as the feeling of unpleasantness. Pleasure is neither a specific sensation nor a common sensation. nor yet a property of all sensations. It is of the same nature as tickling. Pleasure is a diffused tickling, a feeble intensity, while, on the contrary, tickling is a sort of pleasure, well localized and of greater intensity. Bourdon cites certain passages from Descartes, Sur les passions de l'âme, in support of his doctrine, but these are rather general in nature, and have been used quite as effectively by Lang and others in support of the James Lang theory of the emotions. Bourdon does not hesitate to quote Bain in defense of his theory. Bain says he has developed a theory which implies that pleasure, at least in some of its forms, is bound up with cutaneous sensations, and goes on to say that Bain's whole theory of the tender emotion makes the embrace the essential feature in all social pleasures, and quotes him, "A warm, soft touch is influence of the first order." In a word, the pleasures of love begin and end with a sensual contact. Touch is the alpha and omega of affection. He might well have quoted Taine, who said, as early as 1871, that the nerve endings in the skin, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, and intestines, are of three kinds and three kinds only: those of contact, those of heat and cold, and those of pleasure and pain. Let's review successively the innumerable internal sensations, agreeable, painful, or indifferent, of organic life, those constituting hunger, thirst, and repletion, those accompanying digestion, respiration, circulation, copulation, or speech, those produced by wine, medicines, or various substances introduced into the circulation, besides all the spontaneous sensations, tinglings, itchings, shiverings, and all the various hardly definable pains which serve as symptoms of different illnesses, all the specific and very delicate sensations of touch we meet with on the conjunctive, the tongue, and the interior of the nostrils, all the general and blunted sensations of touch, such as we find on the surface of the wound after a recent amputation, we shall see that they are sensations of contact, of cold or heat, of pleasure and pain, more or less obscure, more or less ill-defined, more or less spread about, the same in substance, but diversified by their situation, the order of these phases, and the degree of their intensity. We shall find no other element in them, and by this first reduction we bring tactile sensations under three types, and three only. In forestalling criticisms of his theory, Bourdon says that in the experiences of auditory sensations, visual sensations, and olfactory and gustatory sensations, muscular reflexes are let loose, such as trembling, shuddering, creeping, etc. And by this means the sensations of tickling and of pain are instigated, and are feelings of pleasantness and unpleasantness. Bourdon concludes his paper as follows. In sum, the proposed hypothesis substitutes for the theory that pleasure is a common element of all sensations the idea that it is a special sensation, a diffused tickling of feeble intensity. This view, if adopted, would have the advantage of attaching a sensation, a phenomenon which is now hanging between earth and heaven. The phenomenon of pleasure is the only one to which the psychological textbooks have not assigned an organic substratum and a sensorial base. The reduction of the will to a system of sensation has been plausibly effected. The question of the organs and nerves of pain has been carefully investigated. Pleasure alone has remained inexplicable. Even should by hypothesis which we propose be found unsatisfactory, it will at least serve to call attention to the unique position of pleasure among psychological phenomena. Von Frey identifies unpleasantness with pain, and made pleasure negative, simply the absence or cessation of pain, as Plato did. Daily experience teaches, said he, that what we know as pleasure is simply the relief from pain. As already intimated, Goldscheider's first discovery of specific nerve endings for pain furnished capital material for genetic gymnastics. In 1892, Nicholas, with apologies for having delayed so long, immediately accepts the theory of specific pain and ostensibly by pure dialect proves that psychogenetically pain could not be other than a specific sensation, and that the same theory holds equally well for pleasure. He thinks also that pleasure was the original or primordial sense, and pain did not develop until later. But now the specific sense organs of pleasure have atrophied somewhat, and only a remnant is left in the cortex. Further, he works out a very pretty logical scheme of how the cutaneous and subcutaneous tissue expand and contract, thus giving different qualities of feeling, pleasantness and unpleasantness, with variation of pressure stimulus. One nerve ending says of pain is nearer the surface of the body. That of pleasure lies in the lower tissue, and this contraction and expansion cuts off now one, now the other, of the feeling sensations, in proportion to the intensity of the pressure stimulus. But Nicholas is not to be downed. He reinforces his position by also posting some kind of central associations, what Stumpf calls zentrale Missenfubendigen, to account for the pleasantness and unpleasantness with visual and auditory sensations and images. Warnerfeit, according to Max Meyer, makes pleasantness and unpleasantness elemental and quite distinct from sensation, but regards pain and sex experience as affective, not sensational, pain being simple, intense unpleasantness, and sex experience intense pleasantness. Personally, I cannot seem to find all this in Feit's paper, but if Meyer's interpretation is correct, his view of unpleasantness is identical with that of Bourdon, Nicholas, and Stumpf, while his theory of pleasantness seems to anticipate Lagerberg and Watson. It is interesting to note that Feit insists that pleasure and pain do not influence behavior, a point emphasized later by Watson in reference to learning. Lagerberg regards feeling as weak and unlocalized sensation. And I think we'll stop there as the first part of The Psychology of the Affections by Vance Randolph, Little Blue Book number 727. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in part